I'd love to help you get vulnerable. Let's get naked.
Welcome to the Let's Get Naked podcast. Today we are taking it all off with my good friend Amanda. We were actually just sitting here talking about how long we've known each other, and we decided that it was 2016. Amanda came to work for a company that I owned at that time, and I just fell in love with her instantly. She's always been very authentic. What you see is what you get. And we were just sitting here kind of reminiscing a little bit about when we were talking about 2016, where did that play into kind of our lives at that time? Amanda and I went on a trip. We do like a ladies' work trip. And we did that the same month that I got sober. But I was still drinking. And obviously, towards the end of my drinking career, I was pretty bad. And Amanda was saying that she was actually pretty scared about what was going on that trip. And her and I have never had this conversation, so this is a new one for the folks at home, and I'm going to tell her not to hold back, but I would love to hear your perspective on that. So for everyone listening, the trip was in New Orleans. There were 5 or 6 of us.
5 of us, I
Yeah,
think.
5 of us maybe. And I'm going to let Amanda take it from here and tell that story, and then we'll get into some other stuff about her.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
It was interesting. That just came out, like when I said, oh, that scared me. And then, yes, I'm remembering all kinds of things about it. But I think we had only known each other for about 6 months or so at the time, and so we weren't as close friends then. But we were with other ladies, of course, and my instinct is to protect people. And I witnessed you consume a lot of alcohol. Enough, like I've never even seen other men consume that much. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe I need to stay a little sober on this trip, because we had a few others that were drinking as well and everything. And so I just remember feeling like somebody needed to just hold back a little bit on their drinking and everything, but you never lost your cool.
Right.
That was what was wild about it, is I was ready for anything. And I just witnessed your stability through it the whole time. And it was wild. But, that was, I don't know, 4 or 5 days, know? And it wasn't long after that you got sober.
Yeah, I think that was, we were saying that was probably the beginning of October. And then I had another trip, almost like back to back. So maybe it was more close to the middle. I had another trip, a work trip that was back to back. And I remember on that trip specifically how much I was drinking. And obviously it affects your health, right? And so like my guts were just wrecked, and you just keep doing and going. And like I wasn't eating well, because if you're drinking that many calories, you can't maintain any sort of normal weight if you're going to be eating and drinking. And so I was consuming a lot of alcohol and not really taking very good care of myself. But I remember just really a lot of day drinking and shit on that trip in New Orleans. And then on the work trip, I remember distinctly, like at the airport going, and they sold like bottles of wine that you could take, but you could like take home. And I thought, oh, how great that is. So I bought a couple of bottles of wine. I was only traveling with one other work person. And I went and bought coffees and then dumped out the coffee in the bathroom and opened the wine bottle and poured us roadies for on the plane after we had already spent the entire evening before the flight drinking heavy IPAs and shit at the airport. And what a mess. I got home. I didn't even go home. I went to the casino and spent a couple of hours there. I remember being completely loaded driving to the casino from the airport, and what in the fuck was I doing? That's just outrageous. And the next morning it was sending an email to the ladies at KMI and saying,
I remember that day.
Yeah.
I remember that day.
That was the hardest. Yeah. That was one of the hardest days of my life, because I really, prior to that, the drinking Ann and the before this version of Ann, really felt like she held things together for everybody. And that was maybe part of the problem, is that I always felt like I had to hold everything together and that things would just fall apart if I wasn't around to do that, you know. And and for those that are listening, you know, we have had a business that was maybe, you know, 40, 50 employees, and I handled all the stuff. You know, all of the things ran through me. So it was like, what does leaving to go to rehab for 30 days look like for my business, you know, if I'm not around? And it just got to the point where it didn't matter.
Right.
You know, it was, if that's what's going to happen, that's okay, because my entire life is going to crumble right now, you know? And so it's interesting to hear your perspective from that as well.
I remember that day, and it made more sense. I didn't know you well enough to know that you had a drinking problem at that time. But when I found out that you went to rehab, I was like, yep.
Yeah.
I was really, really proud of you, and proud of you through the whole fucking thing.
Yeah.
To this day.
Yeah.
Like, I have watched you boss sobriety.
I'm
sure there's
appreciate that.
all kinds of hardships that you don't volunteer to people regularly.
Yeah.
But those that do get to see you know that you have done it beautifully.
I appreciate you saying that. It just gave me full body chills, because I've realized in some of the journey that I'm on in the healing that I do a lot of things without giving myself credit for how hard those things are, because you just kind of put yourself into survival mode. And I'm guessing that stems from just shit from when you're a child and the things that you just have to survive, that you just do that. But it's important to recognize enough to give yourself credit, you know, and really show yourself gratitude for getting you through those hard things. And sobriety was not easy for me. I had done enough stuff to really put my life on the edge of falling apart, you know. So the fact that I have excellent relationships with all three of my children today, that my husband is around and loves me more than ever, and vice versa. These are huge testaments. You know, I didn't lose friends that I didn't intentionally want to walk away from in that sobriety, and that's a big deal. You know, because I was very self-centered. I really thought the world revolved around me. And it's almost been a relief to do the work that I've done and realize it has nothing to do with me, in the most healthy, beautiful way, right? I don't have an ego like I did before, right? An ego, a healthy amount of ego is appropriate, but I thought everything was about me, you know? And I always was good to people. I was always generous, like all of the things, but my life revolved around me. I didn't realize that I'm just a speck of sand in this amazing cosmic fabric, you know, that we have. And so
Michael
really,
Singer taught us that, didn't he?
Yeah. Oh, he totally did, which is incredible.
Great books.
Yeah. Amanda is, for those that are listening, Amanda is also a fan of Michael Singer's work. For anyone who doesn't know Michael Singer's work, I encourage you, highly, highly, highly encourage you. That man and his books have changed my life for the better. You know, he has some podcasts that I listen to on the regular, even stuff that I have already heard, I will listen to him again, because the stuff that he teaches is so transforming. You know, I tell people my church is my yoga mat and my Bible is Michael Singer's Untethered Soul and Living Untethered, because it has changed everything for me in the most positive ways possible. So I love that you're also and you read that recently. Yeah. How, this year, or
I'm reading Untethered Souls again for the third time, because you know, when I find myself in a rut and kind of a depression and whatever, reading those books. Another one is The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. That's a Bible of mine as well.
Agreed.
And
agreed.
You know, when I find myself down and out, I will fall back on those books all the time.
Yeah.
And it does. It puts things in perspective in a way that, you know, tells you you're just this small being, and, you know, there's all this stuff going on around you, and you know, just sometimes we have to ride through those rough waves.
Yeah, no doubt. And I would encourage people who haven't read The Four Agreements, definitely read it. That was the first book when I started going to therapy, 9 years ago, that she recommended. And she told me, don't worry about the fluff at the beginning or the fluff at the end, because some people get twisted up in that. Just read the actual chapters that are the Four Agreements, but really read them. Let them wash over you. Let them fill into the cracks. Let them say, like, okay, how can I implement that? Because in reading those and implementing those Four Agreements into my life, again, game changer. right? Because it puts you in control of things instead of feeling like everything's happening to you.
It does.
You know?
I like to tell people when they read that book to practice on themselves first, because that's the most important piece.
Yeah.
We can be all this stuff to other people all the time, every day, day in and day out, but we're not that for ourselves.
Yeah.
How sad is
Yeah.
that?
It's totally sad. And it's also sad to me that I think people don't realize that they should do work on themselves. You know, it's like we went to school as children, we get out of college or high school or wherever you went. And then a lot of people have just stopped learning, have stopped, you know, being curious about things. And for me, it's like, be curious about yourself. Be curious about why you feel certain ways. Do books that are, you know, self-improvement books or podcasts or whatever it is that you're going to do, to just get curious about why you are the way that you are, and is that how you want to be, you know, knowing that you can change those things. I didn't realize that I could change all of the things about myself that I didn't love. You know, I have a whole satchel full of character defects, you know, but to be able to like pull those out and say, this doesn't resonate with me. I don't really love this, you know, or reparenting or reprogramming certain things. You know, I know that, and we'll get into some of your struggles growing up, but I know that you've had a lot of stuff too, like me, that you needed to reparent. That's hard work to do, because I think that's the base of who you are, right? I say like we're a pyramid, right? And the base layer is all of the shit that you learned when you were a child, all of the programming that you came out of the box with, to be able to be brave enough to pull out those bricks that are at the bottom and look at them and say like, this one doesn't resonate, and get rid of it, or this one does, but I'm going to tweak it in this way or that way and then plug it back into the system. You can do it just as I explained it. It seems crazy if you're not in the middle of it, but you know, I can see by the look in your eye, you know exactly what I'm talking about when I say that, because that's the work, you know, when we say the work, that's the work, is being willing to do that.
I feel like our society has done a great disservice when it comes to doing work on ourselves, that there's like this end goal of being healed. I will never be healed.
1000%.
I will be healing my entire life.
Agreed.
I will be reparenting myself my entire life.
Agreed.
Learning my entire life. I don't want to live if I can't learn.
I agree.
That's just where I am and who I am as a person.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, like there's this, we're going to fix ourselves somehow, some way. And, you know, I've fallen game to that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Give me another book.
Yeah.
You know, like it can get addicting.
Yeah.
You know, self-improvement.
Yeah.
If you don't balance that as well, or even try to learn to love yourself where you're at.
Yes. Ugh. God,
You know,
it's
with
so,
that baggage,
yeah.
with that trunk full of shit
Yeah.
that like you don't even want to look at, but it's important to love, because guess what? All those people that hurt you in your past didn't love it either.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to reparent.
Right.
That
Well,
you're okay where you're at,
yes.
and you can grow and do better all the time.
Yes. And also just that whole like loving yourself and giving yourself credit that you made it so far through 100% of your shitty days, of your tough things, right?
Yes.
Giving yourself the credit to do that, because if you look so far ahead or look at all of that, you know, what's in that trunk of shit, it's a lot and it can really be overwhelming. But just knowing I'm going to take it one day at a time. Some days I'm more in tune and more, you know, dedicated to doing the work, and then sometimes I'm like, I'm going to take a minute, you know, I'm going to take a beat and not work on anything, because it gets to be where it's super intense, you know.
Absolutely.
But you know, for me, as I've gotten to this place where, you know, Wiley's old enough where he's off doing his own thing a lot of the times, and Cameron is gone a lot doing his fishing and stuff, which is excellent. It's given me this opportunity to be able to really spend time with myself, and I do. Sunday I turned my music on, and I have this little star scene that I put up on the ceiling in the living room, and light my candles, and journal and write. And wow, it's so powerful, because it really lets me get to know me as I'm doing that, you know, and being at this place where I've agreed to myself that I'm worth doing this work. And really doing Michael Singer's work of not allowing the samskaras to continue to build up and not holding on to things. As you're doing that and you're allowing things to come up and releasing them as they come, it literally feels like I've opened Pandora's box for my memory. You know, we always joked about that because I just couldn't remember stuff. I couldn't remember my childhood. I couldn't remember things that were more than 5 years ago, which was a good thing and a bad thing, because for me, it's like, yeah, I can't remember it, but it was a very soothing thing for me when I was younger. I'm going to try not to get emotional, because I always would tell myself, don't worry, you'll forget when bad shit would happen. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. It will fade away. Mm-hmm. And now that it's all coming back to me, it's like, I'll be driving somewhere and something will be a memory that literally feels like a Mack truck hitting me, and all of the emotions that I should have felt when that thing happened, but I didn't feel. Some of it's good stuff, some of it's bad
Isn't that
stuff.
incredible?
It is incredible because I feel like it's the biggest gift.
We hold our trauma in our bodies.
We totally do. And I thought, I don't want to know. We have this joke, my older of my younger brothers, and I have this joke about like, why would you want to remember? Obviously, you're forgetting for a reason. We said that for years and years and years. And now that it's starting to come back to me because I've been doing this work, I feel like what a gift, like my memory and my things that are coming back and the experiences that I had. But when you start with trauma and you view your life from, I have a friend who explained to me, she put words to things I didn't have words to, which is also such a gift. But she said, I witnessed my childhood from the corner of the bedroom room when the trauma was happening to me, right? You literally have out of body because your mind is amazing and it will protect you. You disassociate. Yes. And so that disassociation, I didn't understand that. I knew that I had that, but I never had the words to go with that. I was like, holy shit. As soon as she said that to me, I was like, that tracks. That's exactly what happens, right? But then you're allowed to do that for yourself when you go through other hard things, and when you're younger, but at what cost, right? Then you can't remember things or like all of these other things that come in. So to be healing from this stuff and having these good and bad memories come up and dealing with them as they come, because they don't come at convenient times.
No, they don't. But you're ready for them.
But I'm ready for them. And that's,
you're ready for them when they come up.
I've explained to all of the people that I work with, like when the uncomfortable stuff happens, bring it on. Every time, I don't care where I am or what's going on or what I'm in the middle of, bring it on.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to push anything back down anymore, because I know that that's, I did that for a little bit at the beginning of my healing journey of like, oh, that's uncomfortable and gross and that makes me feel yucky. And so just kind of pushing it away. Now I'm like, come on,
Sometimes
I'm ready.
That's the beauty of compartmentalizing, if you have so much trauma, can you deal with it all at once?
Yeah. No, it's
so
true.
It's like, nope, let's put that back in there. I can deal with that one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and you helped me with something a while ago where we were talking about the stuff that we're dealing with, and you were telling about like, and then I just put it back in the satchel or the box or whatever, and it's like, okay, I'll deal with this one. Maybe I didn't deal with it all the way, so I'm going to put the rest of that back in there until I'm ready to pull it out again. And the beauty is, yes, this is full of stuff, but as you're pulling out some things and dealing with them, some of the other little things that are hanging on those just fall away and don't really have to be dealt with. It's like they almost like resolve themselves when you're doing that. But just being able to visualize that. Yeah, I carry it around with me all the time, but I don't have to deal with all of that stuff.
It gives you control back a little bit too. When all of that stuff happens, you had no control. You had no control over it.
Yeah.
But it gives you control as an adult to be like, no, I'm not ready for this.
Yeah.
Just like you weren't ready for it when it happened. I'm going to make sure we're in a good place before I pull that sucker back out. And then, sometimes the universe is like, oh, you're ready. You just don't know it.
Yeah. Well, the universe is great about putting that right in your face. Yeah. And I laugh sometimes because there's stuff that I'll deal with. Cameron and I were at a movie the other night, and at the end it had this really aggressive rape scene, and I normally don't watch that stuff because it's very triggering for me. And I just chuckled to the universe and I said, oh, you think I'm ready for this? And I sat there in my discomfort and just really took it in, and it was helpful to be able to do that. But question for you, have you found that as an adult you're a controlling person? Just in that, when you said that you didn't have control over things when you were younger, I feel that exact same way. I spent a good chunk of the majority of my adult life being more of a control freak, and I wonder if it's because I didn't have control over stuff when I was younger where that became so important to me.
Trauma response.
Yeah.
I'm also autistic, and so we like to have control of our environment at all times.
Yeah.
And then you add a little trauma to that and it can be overemphasized.
Yeah.
So I work at it for sure, but it definitely consumed me more maybe through my 30s and now like releasing that a lot more. Getting rid of certain toxic people in my life has allowed me to see and do so much more that their noise was just on top of me, clouding everything.
That's a great way to say that, their noise, right? Yeah. Because it does, it muddles things. It makes it so that you don't see things clearly and don't make decisions for yourself without all of that noise. So that's excellent to be able to say that isn't good for me, and that we're just gonna take right out of there.
Yes.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit, I know that we kind of got sidetracked as we started, but tell me a little bit about your family growing up, like what that looked like, your childhood siblings, parents, were they divorced? Did they stay together? Anything that you're willing to share.
How much time do we have?
I know. Whatever you're comfortable sharing and then we'll kind of talk about that.
I was born in Oklahoma, and my parents were married for just a few years. They divorced before I was 4. I have a few memories in that time frame. They're not good memories. They're some of the first, like, the way that I always shared it was my first few memories were bloodbaths. That was the child witnessing stuff, right? It might have been my mom had put her hand through a window and cut her hand all up, and that was a bloodbath to a 3-year-old, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, and so that's how I was constantly talking about it, but that was always from my child body perspective, and I never put it in a different perspective till she was out of my life, and a lot of that noise went away.
Yeah.
But she remarried my stepfather, who was one of my primary abusers. They had 2 more children, so... And my dad had 2 more children with his still wife for over 30 years now. So there's 6 of us. There's 3 girls and 3 boys of my siblings. I'm the oldest girl. So naturally that came with a lot of responsibility, especially having a single mom. She was married at different times and with boyfriends and stuff, but she was primarily single most of the time. That was, our parade of men was kind of frequent. And I became a mother at 19. I have been essentially caring for other people my entire life. My baby's a senior in high school, so that the bird launching is almost complete.
Yes.
I quit calling it empty nesting.
Yeah, I agree with that 1,000%.
I call it bird launching. It sounds more positive for me. But they're just flying in their own directions. Their father and I separated probably like 12 years ago now. Yeah, about 12 years ago now. But he was one of my greatest friends before we had children. And we made sure that remained for them. We didn't have a whole lot of the deceit or like what people really think leads to divorces. I will say that my trauma probably caused the end of our relationship. But towards the end, it was me realizing that he deserved a love that I didn't have for him, that I wasn't capable of giving him in the way that he needed, and vice versa.
Right.
And so that was hard because we're madly in love with our children.
Yeah.
And we still have the same love for one another that we always did. It's like, what are we going to do to make this work? His parents have been married forever, and his father just passed away in June. But I was product of a shit show. And so we took that and made the best of the world that we could for our kids.
Yeah.
We lived together for about a year after we separated to figure out, how we could give them that best life. And towards the end of that, we had decided it wasn't okay for us to stay in that same house, for the kids to have that root for both of us, and then for one parent to leave. We changed it both. We both got new places. We made it a thing for them, know.
Yeah.
And kind of made it fun for them, new things, new places. And then they didn't have any of those core animosities that can come out of, later. You kick dad out, you kick mom out, and anything can come up in those moments with kids. And then after that, we... It just kind of developed slowly. We were at each other's homes every other night, regardless of whose house the kids were at. We made sure to have dinner with one another as a family. And we built our friendship. We rebuilt our friendship, I should say. And that was hard. That took 2 to 3 years. I was dating. He was not really. And at the core of it, we're just these beautiful humans that, for me, coming from such trauma, I had the rule book of like what not to do.
Yeah.
And that was my godsend,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
for becoming a mother. I primarily, because I think the trauma and maybe even my autism has given me like this sixth sense with people and especially people that are struggling, that if there were ever any actions that I took or words that I said to them and they responded in a way that was not good or they questioned me or anything like that, it was stop. What just happened? Where did this come from? From me?
Yeah.
Why did I do this?
Right.
Why are they hurting? Let's figure this out.
You've been curious then for a long time.
From the very beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have spanked my children once, one time, one kid. It was Hendrix, my middle boy. And man, that was the greatest lesson I ever learned through that experience. He had gotten sick, and I think back then he had strep throat or something. So he was on his very first round of antibiotics, maybe 3 years old or something. And he's allergic to a lot of things like I am.
Yeah.
We just didn't know all of that back then.
Right.
And he reacted very, very poorly, went into psychoses with the antibiotics. But you have a 3-year-old, it looks like a 3-year-old tantrum.
Yeah.
He didn't want anything to do with Dad and I, kicking, slapping, whatever. And I kind of turned him around and swatted him on the ass.
Yeah.
And, oh God, I'll probably tear up here. He has big old beautiful blue eyes, and they just looked right up at me and just started welling up with tears. And he goes, Mama, you told me we're not supposed to hit people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's like
I
a
was
ton of
like,
bricks.
excuse me, son.
Yep.
And I went into my room and just lost it.
Yeah.
Lost it. And I was like, he's fucking right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I went back to him and I sat down, I got down on his level and I was like, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
You're right. And I looked at how I reacted. That was just I was mad. I was upset that he was throwing this tantrum, but it didn't go away. And then it's like, okay, well, what's new in his world?
Right.
He's on antibiotics.
Right.
And then sure enough, one
Figuring
of
that
the
out.
rare side effects to them were psychoses. And I had to get on the internet and find a platform that like found stuff like that because we get all the rare side effects with medication. I have to look at that now.
It's interesting because I listened to you say that and I think this is exactly a perfect example of why I think you're the best mom I've ever met, right? Because I think a lot of parents don't take accountability for their actions, don't apologize to their children, don't get curious about why did that just come out? Because we're programmed with whatever we're programmed with from our childhood. I truly believe everything stems from that. But that doesn't mean we have to do those same things. Right. Yes, you came to it and said, okay, I saw all the things not to do. But even in that moment, realizing I didn't act the best way that I could, right? And being willing to take accountability for that because I think children need to hear you apologize. I think they're our best teachers if you'll allow them to be.
Absolutely.
It takes a lot of humility because it's, from how I was raised, it's here's how it is. This is what we believe. So this is what you believe. Yes. Right. And you're just the opposite. And that's why I think I look at you and I think, wow, I'm just, every time I hear a story that you're telling about with your children, I'm impressed of just you being humble enough to say, is this what fits? Is this right? If it isn't, taking accountability and apologizing for that. When I started apologizing to my children for different things and really letting them be my teacher in life, it just opened a whole new world for me.
Yes.
And we have the best relationship because of it. And I see that with your children as well.
The other piece of it was, or is, that their father allows me to do this. And I watched that develop him into a fantastic father as well. But he and I, so my oldest son is not his biologically, but he raised Hayden. And when he first met Hayden and, we kind of had this conversation about parenting before we chose to have children, it was, I do things very differently and you're gonna have to go with it. And there wasn't really a choice in that. Obviously he wasn't Hayden's father. At the time. And it worked. It fit. He picked it right up. Because of the extensive child abuse that I went through, have a lot of mental health issues. And that was another piece of it is he has never looked down on that ever. And he carried me through motherhood a little bit as well.
Yeah.
And was like, yeah, okay, you have some mental health issues. Does that mean that you're a bad mom? Does that mean that you can't do this? No, It doesn't at all.
Right.
It means you're working really hard to change the narrative that you had. And he's just let me go with it. And so I have a lot of gratitude for him. And, you said the other day at dinner that I'm ahead of my time, and I kind of took that in.
Yeah.
It takes a really brave person to allow a mom, their co-parent to run the kind of show I've run.
Yeah.
It's we have no rules in my home except communication.
Cutting edge. I look at it and I've told you, write a book. Like it's powerful stuff, because I look at it and I wish I had done more of that. I was not a great mom to my children when they were younger. We have spent some time laughing about what a terrible mother I was, and I had the same thing where I was like, okay, this is the things that I don't want to do. I had a whole list of all of that stuff, but I didn't know what to do, and so thank God I have an opportunity. When I got sober, that was 8 years ago, which means Brittany would have been 20. I did not do that love muffin any favors. I did not figure out how to be the best mom to who she was as an individual, and same thing with Emily. She was, a teenager by the time I got sober, and again, not, even when you get sober, you're a shit show for a while after that, after you do get
shit
sober.
Shows,
I know, I mean, just
it's
from,
okay.
From start to finish,
time
it's just
to radically accept that shit. We're shit shows.
And I think that's the beauty in having adult children, is that they do accept that, right? And also I take full accountability to them all the time.
That's everything.
It is. And Sunday night, when I was telling you about spending time with myself and journaling and stuff, I wrote all 3 of the kids letters of just, they know this and I've told them this before, but just reiterating, like, I'm sorry that I was not always everything that you needed and deserved. And thank you for allowing me to be in your world, and thank you for being an amazing teacher. Because when you allow your children to be teachers for who you are, because they're just in this human experience with you, let them be your teacher, right? That's incredible. It's so powerful.
Another one of the things that reminded me of is I've allowed my kids to know me. I come from the maternal line of my family is really secretive. Mm-hmm. And I allowed my kids to know me. I allowed them to know what depression and anxiety is, what trauma is. I wasn't just hiding in my room when I went through depressive bouts. If I did that, it was circling back to them, so they didn't know it was about them. Right. That's what was most important to me, because my mom's instabilities were everybody else's fault.
It's so brave.
Yeah.
What you're saying right now, I have full body goosebumps. It is so brave to do that and to show them that, because your instinct is to have everything. I have everything under control. And whatever, but to be able to really show them behind the curtain of the stuff. And I think that's what's made me so close with my children, is after getting sober, Wiley has had a front row seat to me doing all of the gross healing and sharing with him all of the things that I'm learning and whatever. That young man is the most emotionally intelligent person I know, because of teaching him all of those things and showing him and just having a different perspective. When the girls were growing up, I didn't want them to feel, anything about money. And so I've raised Brittany to think that, like, money just comes and just magically appears and you're taken care of. I've fucked that poor girl up. So I'm trying to fix that. She's like, well, what do you mean I have to go work for all my stuff now? I'm like, I'm sorry, baby. Because I remember, when I was growing up, we were poor, and knowing that my parents showed us that, and how embarrassed I was and how terrible that made me feel. And so I just overcorrected, how that made me feel. Excuse me. I'm like, that doesn't sound right. I overcorrected going the other direction, right? But being able to be brave enough to let your children see who you are and the messy stuff and all of the things, and that you can do hard things. That's what we're supposed to teach our children, right? Not that everything's always going to be right. Not that, if you move these things and tweak this stuff, it's going to be exactly, and it's going to be what you want and what you expect, but we can handle anything.
Absolutely.
Teach them that.
Moving and tweaking their entire lives, and they're amazing humans because of it. They blow my mind on a daily basis.
That's so
and
great.
I let them.
Yeah.
I think a lot of parents don't let their kids blow their minds.
I know.
They're such fascinating creatures.
I love it so much.
Fascinating.
I know. They're my favorite people on the planet. They really are.
I get to look at my kids and see what support and guidance and love
Yes.
actually look like
Yes.
when it's received in childhood.
Yes. And when you're receptive enough to say to them, and I say this to my children as well, tell me what support looks like for you right now. Tell me how I can be that, right? And my children will stick into the difficult conversations and say, Mom, I don't, Emily will call and she'll be venting about something. And my mom, Chip, just automatically starts giving advice. And she'll say, Mom, I just need you to be supportive and to listen right now. I need a cheerleader. Excellent. I'll shut my mouth and do exactly that.
Love it.
But most parents would be like, oh, and they take that personally and whatever. It has nothing to do with me. Her saying that has nothing to do with me. This is what she needs. And having her be smart enough and in tune enough with herself to be able to say, this is what I need in this moment, in a clear way where the conversation stays calm the whole time, and I'm able to shift gears and do that. Oh my God, I'm honored that I didn't ruin my entire family.
Absolutely.
With all of my trauma and everything that I was dealing with and all of that crap, where we can have those conversations. I was doing something with Wiley a couple of days ago, and I felt my parenting that I received coming out. And he stayed calm enough to say, Mom, I don't feel comfortable with that. And I literally had to step back and take a moment and then apologize to him and thank him for being a teacher. It really sparked something for me where I was like, thank God my children are comfortable enough with me to say those difficult things.
Yes.
Because I don't know. I've never been a parent to a 17-year-old boy before. I've never been a parent to a 28-year-old woman. I mean, my daughter has gray hairs.
If we're going to teach our kids to self-advocate, the
Yes.
first stop should be with us.
1,000%. We teach our kids that, and then we're pissed off when they call us on the carpet.
Yeah.
Well, we should do
Absolutely.
that. Let me get curious about why I come from that place, or why I'm defensive, or why I feel like
Yeah.
my parenting can't be called into question. I see all these shows. It's so funny to me. I see all these shows, and everyone's like, well, don't talk about my parenting. Well, who the fuck thought they got it right on the first try?
Right?
You know what I mean? You think you're untouchable? You think you're doing everything perfect? I'm just the opposite. Talk about
Yeah.
my parenting. Where can I improve? How can I do
Yes.
better? I want to do the best
Yes.
possible thing for my children that I can. If I'm fucking something up, call me on the carpet about it. Do it in a fucking supportive and caring way, right? But it's so funny. People are like, well, don't talk about the parent I am. Why not?
I took that professional exit interview, and I was like, I wonder how this would be with a kid.
Oh my God,
And
you're
I
a genius.
I sat Hayden down, my first, right? I sat Hayden down. He was 19. It was before he moved to Vancouver. So after he graduated, he lived at home for a year. But when he was moving away from Mom, I sat him down and I was like, okay, buddy, this is your exit interview.
I love this so much.
Where did I
How
fuck
did I
up,
do?
and how could I do better for your brother and sister for over the next couple of years?
Oh
And we
my
just had a
God.
back and forth, and he gave me a lot of solid feedback. Don't push them to do certain things, and he's like, I'm grateful that you pushed me to get a job right away, but it was too much for me. And it's like I got to a point where I was able to say it, but like suggesting over pushing is a little bit better in that way. And, the second that my other two like turned 16 and whatever, or Hendrix, it was more when he had the ability because his academics took first press, and they just went out and did it themselves. And, Mila was 2 weeks after she turned 16, and Hendrix was as soon as he got back from his graduation trip, and it was immediate. And so that advice did hold up. You don't pressure them,
I love this so much.
Make suggestions.
Have a performance interview with your children, a performance review with your children for how you're doing.
Yeah.
Genius.
Give you an exit interview.
Yeah, because it doesn't
Absolutely.
mean you're going to change everything,
Yeah.
but having that
Yeah.
so that you understand how that's received. I remember one time a couple years ago, the girls were both living in Flagstaff, and I think they were living together. It was the worst mistake ever because they're oil and water, right? I knew, listen, as you get older, you're going to be amazing for each other. Right now, you're going to hate each other, and I'm sorry, but that's how it goes. And I remember having this conversation of teaching them boundaries as I was learning this as well. It was probably 6 years ago, maybe. And saying like, okay, if we're at a place where we're all pushing each other's buttons, anybody in our family of five, you get to use the word triggerfish. And that shuts it down. That you have to, we agreed, we signed a contract, right? Like if somebody else says triggerfish, stop it. That's it. That word shuts it down no matter what it is, because that's a firm boundary of like, I don't want to have this conversation right now. I'm not prepared to, for whatever reason, it doesn't matter. And I can't tell you how amazing that little tool has been for just if somebody's uncomfortable and isn't like, whatever it is, triggerfish, I'm triggerfishing that. Yep. Perfect.
I love it.
I know. So just again, a fun tip of like but sitting down with your kids, what do we need? How can we put in a boundary that's effective for our family? It's going to be different for everybody. But if you're not sitting down saying, how am I doing? How could we be doing better? You do that at work.
Yeah.
You know, you sit and have an annual review at work. Your family is the most important thing you have going on, but we put the least amount of effort into it. Right. We bring the baggage from how we were raised. We dump that onto our children. We're completely defensive. We're blanket defensive against anyone who has any feedback on how we are as a parent. Although women are horrible to each other. I don't give a shit. We're going to be supportive of women. Newsflash, you're all still terrible to each other. Judging another woman for how she's being a mom, fuck you.
Right.
Fuck you. Seriously. Right. It's so inappropriate.
Absolutely.
But it makes everybody defensive, right? So you have this blanket defense up about don't comment about my parenting, but then you don't put any energy and effort into how am I going to raise? These are human beings you're responsible for. These are human fucking beings that you're in your care to fucking raise.
And when we all grow up, we're not the same.
No.
We're all individuals with unique needs and all the above.
Yeah.
I parent to the individual.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that I had to grab onto because they're so completely different.
Yeah.
So different.
Yeah.
And they have different needs, even inside the home.
Yeah.
You know, where we were talking about control earlier, you know, and every parent, especially if you have multiples, you're trying to control how the house looks, right? You got to keep it clean. Everybody's got to have chores. And, you know, the other common theme is that as kids get older, they want money, right? So instead of having a required chore chart, there was just a dollar value for everything that needed to get done. Yeah. And if you want something, go add it up. Yeah. Right? Yeah. If you were too young, let's go over there and try to add it up. Yeah. You know, together.
Which is excellent,
these chores will make $7 and, you know, and
it's so excellent.
And that was trial and error to get to that place. But parenting the individual was probably the most successful. Yeah. You know, and then the kids didn't grow up with those jealousies of one another and like, he does X better than me. But no, they all went to different schools too, because they went to schools that cater to their needs.
Which is excellent, right? Understanding that they're individuals and encouraging them to do that instead of hammering them on the head until they conform to whatever pot you want them to be in.
That's 90% of children.
I believe that. I believe that.
Manipulated and controlled by their parents.
I have been doing a lot of look back because I was one of 5 and looking at, we were all completely different, right? We're over the span of 10 years and my parents didn't know what the hell they were doing. Sorry, Mary and Tom, but you know, I give you credit for doing the best that you possibly could with what you had. It's never, I don't believe that it is. I don't think people have malintent in that. But in looking at that, you know, it was like my parents were very religious and so that was just hammered into us. We are going to fit into whatever this box is, whatever religion we are right now, you're doing that. And organized religion to me just grates against every fiber of my being. It just does. It doesn't fit for me. It doesn't feel good. It feels like someone's trying to control me and tell me shit that I don't believe. And and that, you know, so when I got to this age where I felt like I should have been able to make my own choice and it was, no, if you're living under this roof, you're doing these things. And so I just won't live under this roof because this doesn't feel right to me, you know? And my parents thought I was very rebellious and all of this stuff, but it was like I had sexual trauma on top of sexual trauma, on top of sexual trauma. And then I got to where I was just putting myself in dangerous sexual situations because that's what felt normal to me. Right. And it's interesting because I watch other people as I've helped other people through certain things. And it's like, that's exactly what was happening to me. But no one was paying attention and no one was being supportive of me in that. They were punishing me for different stuff because it was like, this doesn't feel right. I can't be in whatever this is. And it wasn't like, get curious about what that is. It was like, oh, this devil child, we're going to pray for her, bring our friends over and pray for her. like we're going to exorcise some demons. Yeah, there's demons there. Trust me, you don't want to see what they are. I don't think y'all are ready for what's getting ready to come out, you know?
Absolutely.
Because you don't know at that point. You know, I've unpacked this as a woman in my 40s, but I didn't realize how detrimental all of that stuff was. You know?
I have very similar stories in the beginning.
We do have very similar stories.
I left home at 15 and I moved from here, Arizona, to New York City to model.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. So I think I moved to Arizona when I was 13 from Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
And I started modeling fairly quickly. And that gave me the knowledge that money could get me out.
Yes. Money was freedom to me.
And the second I had a ticket out, I did whatever I could.
Yeah.
And I don't know really. I guess I've never really asked my parents this question, but my mom just let me go at 15. Mm-hmm. She signed not custody, but
emancipation.
No, she just gave guardianship over to these two women that owned a studio, a modeling studio that we met once.
Can you imagine that?
No.
Can you imagine doing that with one of your children?
No.
Like, that's outrageous.
No, but like, I was also 15 and I was going to say and do anything to get me there.
Yeah.
So I was right along with it. And
I totally agree.
You know, those ladies just wanted rent paid and for me to make money for them.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, you can sign this paper. I was working in a bar months later trying to make rent because you don't just become a model. You just don't go start making money.
Right. There's the dirty, gross stuff underneath that you have to work really hard to do all of the things and put it together. It's outrageous. It's crazy to me because I look at some of the stuff and you say that about money. Money was freedom to me.
Yeah.
We grew up poor and that's what that equated to for me. And that's what drove me very early on to always be like, what's the next job that I can have? You know, if I had a job, okay, I'm going to crush this. I'm going to work harder. I'm going to outwork everybody in this field, whatever. But then what's the next and what's the next? And I always was like, okay, what's the next step up? What am I working towards? But it always was very money driven because money was freedom to me, you know, and I find that fascinating. May I ask you how old you were when you lost your innocence for the first time? I was 8.
I was 4.
Yeah.
That continued for the 6 years my mom was with her husband. And
yeah.
And then I was also raped in New York when I was 17. Mm-hmm. When I moved there, getting in the entertainment industry, I do not recommend to
anyone.
Yeah. But because there are more monsters than there are good people, and especially those that will take advantage of people that don't know any better.
Yeah.
And so that quickly led me to numb myself with drugs.
Yes.
And it was free in the entertainment world. It's free. You go to any models party, you can do anything that you want. God. And so I got myself into that. And, you know, I was high as a kite on heroin the night that I was raped. And, you know, that I died that night. Yeah. And, you know, that was my liberation though. That's where I got my freedom from.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to be able to sit here and say that to you right now.
It is.
Yeah.
I remember having my first drink of alcohol, and when I started getting buzzed and it took me out of my body and feeling like, this is home.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It felt, and fuck you for making me get naked. This is not the right.
You make me cry all the time.
I know, fuck. It felt, it was numbing, right? It was numbing because it was like, you just don't think about all of that other shit that happened to you and all of the stuff that's so fucking gross that lives inside of you that's just covered in shame that you can't talk about, that you blame yourself for, all of those things. I find it fascinating that we don't talk to our children more about the monster, right? Because the monsters are everywhere. Right. And a lot of times the monsters live in your house, right? As they did for both of us, right? And so it's like, here's a great question. How did you address that with your children? You're my parenting star. How and when did you address that with your children? Or have you, where are you at with all of that? If you're willing to say that.
It didn't come out as gracefully as I would have planned. I was the young mom who didn't think it happened to boys, right? And so at first there was no conversations with the boys or even in my mind the need to prepare for that. But I knew I was having a daughter the second, like during conception. It's like this is like it was really wild.
Yeah.
And I wasn't happy about it.
Right.
I was scared to death.
They're hard
To have my daughter.
Yeah.
Scared to death. And it was really young with her. You get the mailings of pedophiles or whomever that get, released if they live in your neighborhood or whatever, they flyer. Those went up on our fridge.
Fuck yes. Yes.
Like we knew who the monsters were.
Yeah.
And there weren't that many in our neighborhood, thankfully.
Right.
But we
But
did
it's still a thing.
We did have one instance where this man was released to his 86-year-old mom's house that was 2 blocks away from us. And he tried to show up at the neighborhood, I forget, it
Fun
was a
event or
neighborhood,
whatever.
yes.
Yeah.
And there were police and firemen there to play with kids and whatever and show them inside the cool cars and trucks. And so they immediately were like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
There's kids here.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah.
That's why I did that.
Yeah.
But then there was an instance when my daughter was 7, and I won't be super specific because I didn't get permission from her to tell this.
Yep.
But she did something that put the fear of God in me for her, and I locked it down. She got every bit of your body is your body talk, stranger danger, she got it hard.
Yep.
And I don't regret it.
Yeah.
I don't
agree
regret
with
it.
you.
It did hurt us for a few years. She became scared of me, but I needed her to be afraid of the monsters.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I continued obviously parenting the way that I do. And she was 11 when she circled back to me and was she stood up to me.
Yeah.
She stood up to me, and our relationship could not be better.
Which is excellent.
To this day for that. But she was just like, there's a little bit of sexism going on in the house. Just because I clean better, does that mean that I have to do this, and this?
Right.
And because the boys don't do it. And, my daughter doesn't clean a toilet in the house. I don't either. I don't clean toilets.
Yeah, if there's men that live in the house.
I don't do it.
And
she doesn't either. And she called me out in that moment, but it was also a defining moment for her and my older son because it was about a year after the car accident that you know about when she says, oh, and by the way, my dad almost died too. Yeah. And it was a pump the brakes. I didn't get my oldest and my youngest help from that accident. Yeah. I got Hendrix help because he was in it.
Right, exactly.
And I helped Anthony because that was helping my kids too to know their dad was safe.
Right.
But I didn't know to get them help.
Yeah.
And they went through hell too.
Absolutely.
That's
a traumatic for the whole family.
To be like, okay, I'm not looking at certain aspects. It was more like I'm trying to scare her to protect her throughout life. And I needed to circle back and do that differently.
Yeah.
I
think that that's something that's really important to do because I look back and I think there was never a conversation about any of that, about the monster, right? Whoever the monster is, it doesn't even matter. But in my family, not from my mom, not from my aunties, not from anybody. And for me, it's like, let's have the conversations. When is too young? I don't think that there is. I think there's age appropriate stuff that you can be having conversations with about your body is your body. We don't, if someone came to you and said, don't tell so-and-so or all this and that and whatever, you come straight to me. Here's what's a safe secret. Here's what unsafe secrets are. You can talk to your kids in different contexts of that. That's protecting them because you can't unring that fucking bell. Right. You can't take that. You can't give back their innocence.
By letting them advocate for just normal stuff.
Yes.
If you're a kid who does not like to be hugged, why should you be forced to just because it's family?
Yeah.
That reiterates things in their mind that they need to be normal.
Yes.
To have physical
and to compromise themselves and what their knowing is so that somebody else stays comfortable. Right. Emily is so funny because she is like, I don't have any hugs anymore. I'm not hugging anybody. She'll come in and say that just like that. Doesn't matter who the hell's in the room. I respect the shit out of her. Or she'll come and she'll say like, I do have a hug for you, and she'll give you a hug, and it's always authentic, and it's genuine, and that she's not. Yeah, I love that for her, right? But it's literally that, honoring them, supporting them and what they feel and what they know is right, and then giving them the knowledge. Because if we don't give our kids the knowledge to be able to know that bad shit happens and that there shouldn't be secrets and that they always can come to you for stuff and that you're supposed to be a safe place. I don't want to be the mom where kids are out getting in trouble and they say like, oh shit, we don't want to tell mom. I want to be the ones where they're like, I'm going to call my mom right now, right? Because I'm not going to freak out, because I'm going to be there with you to handle stuff, because I'm going to, there's nothing that you can tell me that's going to make me think less of you. Yep. You know what I mean? So you need to be able to create that safe space with your kiddos instead of just assuming that they know that somebody shouldn't touch them. And you're right, it happens to fucking boys. And I have been dealing with more men and their sexual trauma. And I think there's almost more shame associated with that than there is with women, because it's more common with women. But I don't know very many women, probably I can count 2, that have not been sexually abused as children or at some point in their lives. And you say that to, I don't talk to Cameron about specifics, but just in telling him, like, you can't even get your head around it. He's like, I don't understand. I'm like, he's like, how? Because he doesn't, he doesn't think like that. He hasn't had something like that happen, or like blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, it fucks us up, like bad. Imagine what that looks like if you started having sexual trauma from the age of 4 or 8, and by people right? Which adds a whole different element to it. It's not like a stranger and it's stranger danger. These are people that we're supposed to be able to trust, that have assaulted us repeatedly, and then put it in our brains because they fuck with you by telling you you're not supposed to say something to people. Oh, mom would be mad. Don't tell her. What do you think that does to a child? Right? You're supposed to be worried about going out and playing and being able to like this and that. And instead you're worried about, right? Like, I'm reading Maya Angelou's, I think it's her first autobiography about I Know What Makes Why the Birds Sing, or whatever that book is.
I haven't read it.
Right. It's talking about her being raped by her stepfather at the age of 8 years old. Get your fucking head around that. That happens all the time. People don't, and we're not going to talk to our children to let them know that, like, hey, this isn't appropriate. Right. This is, if somebody comes to you and is whatever, no, this is your body, like, let's have the conversation.
Let's have the conversation.
Let's have the conversation.
Yeah.
So I'm going to encourage you to, let's get on that book and you'll figure out with whoever you do about what that conversation looks like. I saw an Instagram post recently. It was a mom talking with a young child, and it was talking about the things that you should have a conversation with your child at any age. It was appropriately naming your private parts, because we all need to be on the same page, and there's nothing shameful about that. Knowing that your body is your body, and same thing about, you don't have to hug people if you don't want to, right? Knowing you listen to your gut, right? What consent is and how important that is. Because I've talked to men who, when they were younger, knew that they were doing something a girl didn't want, but she didn't vocalize it and they didn't stop. That I heard when I was down in Costa Rica, the ayahuasca thing, it hit me like a fucking Mack truck, because I'm talking to this guy about something that happened, and he was like, I was the guy. And I was not. Apparently the universe thought I was ready for that. But it was a powerful conversation, because I was just like, holy shit. He's like, and I'm healing from that, because I knew it was wrong. I knew she was tensing up and it wasn't whatever, but no one said no, and men don't get it. Like, how can women not say no? It happens all the time.
Yeah.
Right? We don't have a voice. We've been raised a certain way, and like all of this shit. So, oh my God, we could literally talk about this forever. But again, I'm going to come back to, let's figure out how to get you in a book and like putting that knowledge out there. Yeah, because it's powerful. It's important. So
the universe is handing me more time at the end of the school year. So
well, you know what? Use it wisely, because the world would really be impacted by having your take on things. I could not. Your wisdom resonates so highly with me, of just not being afraid to really be vulnerable with your children and figure things out. So
I have not always felt confident in that.
Yeah.
That's one thing I'm
working on,
trying to work on and standing inside of at the moment.
Well, I'm proud of you. It's brave. So we're getting close to running out of time. For this week, may I suggest having a performance interview and review with your children. Like that to me, yes. Absolutely. You know, I think when you ask them, how am I doing? How is
At
this
any
working?
age.
Like,
Yeah.
and be vulnerable with them. Wouldn't you want that?
What
like,
can I do better?
Yeah, absolutely. You
What
do
do
it
you
at-
love
you
about
do
what
it
I
at
do?
work,
What
and
do you
that's-
not
yeah,
love?
absolutely. What do you feel like is working? So that's my may I suggest for this week.
Love it.
If you have suggestions or questions, please send us an email. Our email address is ladies@letsgetnakedpodcast.com. If you have shitty things to say, don't bother. We're not interested. Change the channel. I think that's all we have for this
Thanks
week.
for having
Yeah, Amanda will
me.
definitely
Love
be
you so
someone
much.
we see again. She's someone who's a very important person in my life and has a lot to offer in the vulnerability category, and so we'll definitely see more of her. So that's a wrap. Thanks, guys.
I'd love to help you get vulnerable. Let's get naked.